Damien O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and indeed it's a pleasure to stand and read a speech or to speak to the Animal Welfare Amendment Bill. The Minister's made reference quite rightfully to, I think, a regime in this country that does uphold and certainly promote and demand the highest levels of animal welfare of any country in the world. Indeed, we rely on it because our economy is dependent upon our reputation. The Minister hasn't been so good in some areas in upholding that reputation, but I applaud the fact that today he and the Government are bringing to the House the Animal Welfare Amendment Bill. As the Minister has said, there are a number of changes, technical for the most part, to the 99 Act that will improve the regime of animal welfare management, right through from farms through to sale yards and slaughter, and indeed it deals with the issue of export of animals from this country. Mr Speaker, we do have a good reputation. I think the images of New Zealand of sheep or cows in pastures with a spectacular backdrop anywhere around New Zealand are the images that sell our country to the world. And the assumption, of course, in that we have a clean environment is one. The next one is, of course, that we have good welfare practices that look after the beautiful animals. And the third, of course, is that whatever we produce from that system is safe for consumption. A huge reputation, one hard-earned by farmers and processors and workers and everyone through 150 years of innovation, and it's something that we must work hard to maintain and uphold. Mr Speaker, the dairy industry alone has seen a rapid growth in the number of dairy cows, heifers and calves across this country. And with that, there's been a greater level of public awareness of the way they are managed. And it's rather timely, I guess, given the focus on the dairy industry and what is produced from it, that as the public drive up and down our roads or go out into the country and see dairy animals, it is important that they understand that those animals are being well managed. It is a commercial operation. It might not meet the needs of or the expectations of a pet owner, but it is a commercial operation, and the legislation that we pass must balance the economic needs of this country with, I think, the underlying assumption and demand from each and every New Zealander, and indeed across the world in most Western countries, that we respect the right of animals to not be treated unfairly, tortured, or in any way, demeaned and I guess treated without any respect at all. I'm not one that thinks that animals deserve the same rights as humans. I'm not at all. I'm a farmer, but I also believe that the abuse of them should not be tolerated in any way. There has been, it might have been on that member's farm, I would hope not, though, a number of cases recently where farm workers have abused animals, and I have to say the industry needs to take a look at that. I know those kinds of situations arise out of frustration, and those workers shouldn't be there. They may be for whatever personal reasons, and the industry needs to take a good look at how they better offer pastoral care for workers on farms. Just a note for the couple of dairy farmers on that side of the House, Mr Speaker. The bill, as I say, creates regulations, creates a better regime for implementing standards that we are demanding. Labor and Government looked at the issue of sour crates, Mr Speaker, and of course hens for egg production. We made progress in that area. We moved to phase out sour crates, gave the industry time. The reality that the industry has half the pigs produced out of a sour crate environment and half in means that it is possible to do, but there is a cost involved. And so we in Government gave a clear indication to the pork industry they should phase those out. The same for egg production. There have been some changes to the size of crates, I think, for hens, moving cages. That's, yes, my colleague corrects me. That have moved in the right direction. Free range is a wonderful marketing terminology. There are issues around animal welfare if all the chooks were to be free range, believe me. So it's about balance, Mr. Speaker, and in Labor we're happy to support the government, but what we do need to get from government is an assurance that they will provide the resources to implement the new provisions of this Act. Because I go to the regulatory impact statement here, and while an enthusiastic supporter of the bill and the improvements it will make, I have to say that the regulatory impact statement is rather alarming, because it says here that everything, of course, must be, quote, in terms of cost to government, all proposed changes to the Act would be implemented by the Ministry on a fiscally neutral basis. What that says, Mr. Speaker, is they're not going to spend any more money on this. So while there will be an expectation of higher levels of animal welfare, implementing, policing those standards, this national government, true to form, is not going to put any more money in there. Well, as an example of what has happened is that the national government's got this proposal to double export earnings from this country, a laudable and worthy objective, Mr. Speaker. So they want to rapidly increase the exports from particularly our primary sectors, great, but they cut the funding to the agencies that oversee, protect and monitor that export sector. So you can't have it both ways. And we are now currently dealing with a major problem of reputation for our dairy sector, because the national government cut funding for the Ministry of Primary Industries' responsibility, while expecting that the growth in the industry, the growth in exports was to continue. In fact, to ramp it up even further. It does not collate, Mr. Speaker, that you can have both. In the end, you don't get something for nothing, and those so-called smart business people over there should understand that. Well, I haven't been able to identify, but I'm sure there must be one. You don't get something for nothing, as most of my constituents understand, Mr. Speaker. And the problem is that when you have a regulatory impact statement saying, effectively, that the government is not going to spend any more money in this area, then we have to ask the question, will the increased standards, the better regulations that we're going to pass through the bill, will they be implemented? Because what is at risk here is our reputation. We have millions, in fact about 6 million dairy cows I think at the moment, and rapidly growing. One situation on the front page of a newspaper, the abuse of one of those cows or calves is enough to start to undermine our reputation. So it's no good passing the best legislation here in the House and then not having the resources to ensure that indeed we carry that out, and every farmer and every individual carries it out across the board in this country. Mr. Speaker, we have a good reputation. It's been hard won, and we must uphold that, just as we've had that in food safety. But the government, again, because it has cut resources to core government responsibilities, has allowed that reputation to be dragged through the mud for too long internationally. Hopefully we can restore that. We do not want the same thing to happen here in animal welfare. And while there have been a few more inspectors appointed by the government, the overall pressure, I acknowledge that, the overall pressure on the whole of Ministry for Primary Industries, which covers a raft of things, Mr. Speaker, from biosecurity through to forest management and fishing, that budget has been cut, the pressure is on, and we need to know, and we'll be investigating in the Select Committee, that the government is going to commit more resources to implement the higher standards that will effectively be put in place when this bill becomes law?
The Honourable John Banks.
Rise this morning to speak in support of the first reading of this animal